Dealing with Immigration. A presentation by Paul Brackey, author, publisher. American Leadership Books. Author of 9 books on social, political, and criminal justice issues. This has become a major flashpoint of contention, especially at the southern border. It's not just Mexicans coming to the U.S. for work or trafficking drugs, but thousands of immigrants from Central America. These immigrants are seeking asylum in the U.S. Mostly they come from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. The immigrants commonly claim they are fleeing from economic turmoil, gang violence, and the threat of death in their home country. This may be true, and under traditional asylum law, destination countries are supposed to take them in. But this law was written decades ago before the modern explosion of immigration with over 65 million refugees around the world. Thus, the U.S. and other countries are being overwhelmed with immigrants, and we cannot take them all in, even if they have valid claims. Due to this flood, there is a huge backlog in processing cases. Migrants are being detained in Mexico and the U.S. About 2,500 parents and children have been separated. Some migrants are attempting to flee into the U.S. by any means possible. Some migrants are drug smugglers and criminals, taking advantage of an overburdened border patrol. Some criminals use the cover of seeking asylum to gain entry. There is no clear best solution. This presentation provides an overview of the crisis. Then it suggests some ways to deal with the problem. The goal is to ease the burden on America and find a humanitarian way to help the migrants. This might include returning them to their home country safely. Our porous southern border resulted in a prolonged influx of illegal immigrants over the years. Now over 11 million illegal Hispanic immigrants are in the U.S. Many were seeking sanctuary from horrific violence in Mexico and Central America. Many were seeking a better life for themselves and their families in the face of high unemployment in their country. Often illegals take jobs at low wages that Anglos disdain, such as farm labor and work in restaurant and housekeeping industries. But they take some desirable jobs that reduce wages for others, such as, in the homebuilding and construction industries. So resentment of white Americans has grown. Illegal immigrants are costly for the U.S. economy and cause resentment from Anglos in these ways. They obtain social services, such as for healthcare and education. They have more expensive medical costs, since they avoid medical care because they can't afford it, wait until seriously ill, and require expensive emergency care. They have more children than Anglos, so they obtain more of the national education budget. Some have benefited from affirmative action. Another big gripe is that Hispanics speak a different language and often make little attempt to assimilate. Like most immigrants, Hispanics are more comfortable among their own, reflected in many ethnic neighborhoods. Bilingual education has been permitted and even encouraged in certain communities. This diverts education funds away from Anglo children. This may have slowed progress of Hispanic children assimilating into our culture. Anglo resentment of Hispanics has made immigration reform more difficult, despite an agreed-upon need for reform. Many Anglos despise the notion that illegals are granted amnesty. They would prefer that illegals be deported or self-deport. The existence of multiple languages and cultures in the U.S. is another source of tension. This is especially true between groups in close contact with each other. This also occurs where a recently arrived cultural or language group has been growing, so the group already there perceives an economic and social threat. The building of a wall between the U.S. and Mexico has added to the tension over illegal immigration. The tension has increased, since President Trump has continued his campaign promise to build the wall. The resentment has increased among Hispanics in the U.S. and Mexico. Walls can work, such as the walls in Israel built to create a barrier between Israel and Palestine. But walls come at a cost, both financial and in terms of public relations. Unless adequately manned or monitored, walls can be crossed with ladders, ropes, or tunnels. It will be hard to locate all the tunnels that might be built along the U.S. 1,800-mile border with Mexico. The flow of immigrants across the southern border is down in the last several years. A key reason for the decline is the Mexican economy has flourished, reducing 6.9 million illegal immigrants from Mexico, Central America, and other areas down to 5.4 million as they return to Mexico. But the increase in asylum seekers from Central American, including recent caravans, has overwhelmed our capability to manage them in aged facilities designed for young male immigrants. Here are more numbers that show the extent of the immigration problem. In 2018 alone, the Border Patrol apprehended around 500,000 illegal immigrants. This high number of immigrants increases the chances that a smaller number of dangerous criminals will evade detection and enter the U.S. illegally. About 6,000 troops sent by President Trump were camped on the U.S. side of the border, after building concrete barriers and putting up barbed wire fences to keep out the immigrants. If the numbers of illegal asylum seekers was decreased by a wall or other border security, dangerous criminals would be provided less cover and freedom. Border Patrol agents would be more likely to apprehend them. The battle over funding a wall in Congress has created a stalemate. This stalemate is likely to get worse as growing hordes of migrants descend on the border and seek entry. Often these migrants end up in detention facilities and are increasingly turned back to Mexico and urged to return to their home village. But will they return? It may seem inhumane to refuse entry to the migrants. But the alternative is to jeopardize the U.S. economy and society, because the migrants might take jobs at lower wages, seek aid from our social welfare system, potentially burden our criminal justice system with criminals involved in drug dealing and gangs, contribute to the fears of many white Americans about being overrun by non-white migrants and becoming a minority in the U.S. over the next few decades. Mexico has been willing to house many asylum seekers until the courts rule on their asylum applications. Several thousand migrants have been held in detention camps in Mexico. Many immigrants will stay in Mexico, where they may be better absorbed into the Spanish-speaking Mexican culture. However, the Mexican government has recently been reluctant to deal with the massive influx of migrants draining their resources. So Mexico has started deporting many migrants back to their home country. In desperation, in response to the detentions and deportations, many migrants have been turning to coyotes. Some have given their life savings to coyotes to smuggle them across the border to the U.S. The migrants have been willing to take their chances, despite the hardships of the crossing and the uncertainty of getting through successfully. The odds are about 50-50 according to the popular news media. Under the circumstances facing the migrants, the U.S. economy, and the attitudes of Anglos, the following is recommended. We should encourage the migrants to stay in Mexico or return to their home countries as much as we can. We should even subsidize any Mexican initiatives to accept the migrants. Though it is not practical or moral to expel 11 million illegal immigrants, there is another way. We can incorporate illegal immigrants short of legalization. We can reduce future illegal immigration, which most Americans against legalization fear. Along with the wall, we need cameras, sensors, drones, and beefed-up border patrols. Combined with other methods of protection, walls help reduce the number of people who seek to get across the border. Having the wall helps to convince people not to break the law in the first place. This reduces the number of people trying to come to the U.S. for jobs or public benefits, since they feel they are less likely to succeed. With fewer immigrants, the Border Patrol can focus on keeping out the more dangerous and violent people. With less economic migrants coming in, the Border Patrol and customs agents can respond to and arrest truly dangerous people. This will discourage criminal cartels involved in human and drug trafficking. Though drug traffickers use cars, trucks, boats, tunnels, and other means, new technologies can provide better screening, and fewer economic migrants means more Border Patrol agents to deal with the traffickers. The wall can discourage the coyotes and traffickers who are taking advantage of the illegal immigrants' desperation to cross the border. Besides discouraging coyotes and traffickers, we can increase but restrict the number of families and other immigrants admitted legally. Here's how. Migrants might be required to demonstrate an aptitude in conversational English. Migrants might have to bring certain documents attesting to legal family members in the U.S. who can host them. Migrants might be required to agree to certain work commitments to be allowed to cross the border. Another reason to build the wall is because they have helped control the border in other countries. All over Europe, countries are building fences on their borders to keep out millions of Middle Eastern and Afghan refugees. These countries include Hungary, Bulgaria, Austria, Greece, Spain and Norway. Israel has a wall on the West Bank and has reinforced it with border guards. There are many reasons walls work, from discouraging criminals to controlling other immigrants at the border. Walls also stand as a symbol of the country's resolve to secure its borders. The border isn't the only solution, and there are always ways to breach it, so the border doesn't have to be completely secure. The wall mainly has to reduce the huge influx of migrants to a more manageable level. Then other steps can reduce illegal immigration, such as with a better electronic e-verify system making it difficult for illegals to work in the U.S. What about the illegals already in the U.S.? What should we do about them? The U.S. should have a better visa tracking system to keep track of immigrants with visas. About 40% overstay their visas. Given the worldwide threat of illegal immigration, we need to take measures to reduce illegal immigration to regain control of our country. We need to act now before we are overwhelmed by the huge threat of migrants on our borders who are part of the global migration crisis. If we don't act now, we could suffer from even more migrants from other parts of the globe attempting to get into America. We need to act now, since the major sources of immigration in Europe have sought to keep them out. Previous books and chapters on immigration in the U.S. Fractured America. Chapters in Crime in America. Uncertain Justice. For more information, American Leadership Books, Little Rock, Arkansas. www.americanleadershipbooks.com. Info@americanleadershipbooks.com